Hello, and thanks for being on today's webinar. My name is Ryan Dodge. I'm with Silverstream Financial Solutions Group. We are a division of Silverstream Advisors, and today's topic on our webinar is economic certainty in uncertain times. And as you'd probably agree, it's a pretty timely topic that we're going to be talking about today. Because I think you'd probably all agree that we are in some uncertain times right now. There's so many things happening in the financial world that so much information that we're being bombarded with that it's really hard to kind of grasp all of it as it comes in and really try to put it in its place and understand where it applies to our own personal financial life. One of the things that I've always liked talking about with my clients is the difference between certainty or things that we control and uncertainty. And those are all those things we don't control. So when we talk about uncertain times in the world around us, the financial world, we're talking about the things like, oh, I don't know if the tax rates that are constantly changing. We don't really control those kinds of things. We don't control what the stock market does on a daily basis. We don't control what the real estate markets do. We don't control what interest rates do, what inflation does. All these things, all these external factors are things that we don't control. We also don't control the financial decisions that all the financial institutions are making from day to day. We don't control what banks are doing. And so how do we get a handle on all of these things that we don't control? So these are some of the questions that we constantly get asked here at Silverstream Financial Solutions Group. Things like, how secure is my financial future? What's going to happen with taxes? How is that going to affect my retirement estate and financial security? What will happen to my investments if the recession deepens? That's a question we've been getting a lot lately. Based on the economic uncertainty of our economy as a whole, how is that going to affect my personal investments? How are the tax laws that are going to change? How is that directly going to affect me and my family? Things that happened in January 2013 immediately affected everybody. Payroll tax increases when they repealed the payroll tax cuts. So I think those are some things some questions we need to be asking, and there are some things we need to understand about the financial world so that we can make the most of when any of those things happen. So who is Silverstream Financial Solutions Group? Well, what we are is we're a group that understands we live in a world of complexity and change. In fact, common saying that the only constant in this world is change. What we are going to do is we're going to take that complexity and we're going to help you create a financial model. And I liken this financial model to kind of like a blueprint. If you were going to go out and build a house, we can kind of all imagine in our mind's eye what this house is going to look like, but at some point we need to put it down on paper. We need to create that blueprint so that the architect and the people who are building the house know what it is that you want to build. And we're going to evaluate the overall efficiency of your entire financial model, not just pieces of it. Again, going back to the analogy of the house, we don't want to know if just one window in the house or one room is built efficiently. We want to know that the entire house was built efficiently and done with the best materials possible and done with the least amount of cost and yet still as safe as possible. Our job here is to simplify your life, to make it to make it more simple and not complicated. A lot of what happens when we're dealing with financial products is things get really complicated. We've got 100 different financial decisions that are happening all at once, and how do we know how those different financial decisions are affecting each other? What's the interaction there? These financial decisions we're going to help you make are based on principles, not hype. I like to say that we're going to educate on principles. We're going to teach a lot of strategy and probably spend a lot less time on financial products. Financial products are usually the thing that we like to jump to because that's that's the thing that is the most exciting to talk about. But what we want to do is make sure that we're making sound financial decisions based on principles first. We use macroeconomic tools. That just means we're big picture people. We're going to look at you as a whole. It'd be like going into a doctor and saying, I want you to evaluate my entire health versus just look at my finger here where I have this cut. I want to understand, how that's going to affect me as a whole person. So to start off, we'll start talking a little bit about some of the basic rules of financial institutions, and these are rules that they live by, and these are rules that they have set so that they can interact with us and they can be profitable. Now, I liken this game we're playing with the financial institutions to a game of chess. Now, when you play chess, you have to understand how your opponent thinks, and you have to understand what kind of moves that they are possibly going to make. Some of the best chess players in the world are thinking 6 or 7 moves ahead. So you have to be able to anticipate what's going to happen, and you have to also be able to adapt to that change and adapt to the moves that they're making. So one of these rules that financial institutions live by is that they want to get our money regularly. That's just a real basic rule. They're going to sell us products, they're going to entice us to deposit money with them, and they want it regularly. If we can be doing monthly deposits, they're going to give us incentives to do that. The second thing they want to do is they want to hold on to our money as long as possible. How they do this is they might say, well, if you don't take your money out of the bank, for example, we'll give you, maybe we'll waive some fees. Or if you roll it from this financial product to this financial product, maybe there won't be that charge that you would otherwise be getting, a surrender charge. And that is kind of rolled into the other role, is they just don't want to give it back if at all possible. They're going to give us a reason to want to have our money there as long as possible. 5-year CD instead of a 1-year CD. We'll pay you 2%, 1.5%, whatever 5-year CD is paying right now, instead of 0.5% on your savings account. Let's give you a reason to keep your money here as long as possible. So these are some of the rules that financial institutions are living by. They're also giving us teaching us a lot of what they consider to be good strategies. A lot of times we don't know if these strategies are good or bad until we've done a careful financial analysis, but these are things like compound interest, dollar cost averaging, payroll deducted qualified plans, low deductibles on insurance, non-deductible loans or credit cards, mortgages of less than 30 years. I'm sure most of you have seen an advertisement or heard somebody say, let's get you down to a loan of 15 years instead of 30 years so that you don't have to pay as much interest. Now, if interest was how a financial institution made money, why would they be trying to sell you something that got them less interest? So there's got to be more to it than just saying, this is a better deal for you. Or let's just say I view that one with a little bit of skepticism. Prepaying mortgages by accelerating your payments and municipal bonds. Some of these things are strategies, or in the case of municipal bonds, they're even products that financial institutions are selling us to, and they're trying to convince us that these are a good idea. And we don't necessarily know that yet at this point. And we're only going to know that through a careful personal financial engineering evaluation. And some of those might be effective, some of them might not be as effective. Without a financial evaluation, or without taking a closer look at that and building this model that we talked about before, all these financial decisions you're making are going to be uncoordinated, and they're not going to be integrated. It's going to be really easy for you to be swayed by somebody's opinion. They're going to be largely needs-based, and some people might be thinking, well, if it's based on your needs, how is that a bad thing? Well, the reason it's a bad thing is if I asked you, for example, how much money are you going to need next week exactly for food? You probably have a pretty good idea. You might get within a couple of dollars. But let's go out a month. How close are you going to be? Well, let's go out a year. The further we get out, the harder it is to know exactly what our needs are. In fact, it's an impossible goal to achieve when you say, I want to make sure I have everything I need. Much better to say, well, how about we go out there and I'm going to try and achieve everything I want. And in the process, by achieving what I want, I'm certainly going to take care of my needs. A lot of times we're going to have things based on unrealistic goals, sales hype. Every time a financial institution introduces a new financial product, they want to get it out to as many people as possible. And this is, I kind of liken this to, you go in to buy a computer, you leave the store, and the computer that they replace it with or put back on the shelf is already faster and probably costs less than what you just bought. There's an enormous amount of buyer's remorse when it comes to things like electronics. And financial products can be that way as well. A lot of times financial institutions will introduce a new product feature that didn't exist on their previous products, and they're going to entice you to roll into that new product. And so they're kind of like any other company that is just looking at selling a new product. A lot of times it's based on convenience. It's what's around. If I don't have a lot of experience in buying financial products, I'm just going to buy what I know. There's a lot of confusion as well about it. And then it's entirely, it's very uncontrollable. We just, all of these things out here, all these financial decisions that we're making, we can't control them. Going back to what I mentioned earlier on, saying there are so many elements, things out there that we don't control that give us economic uncertainty. Greatest example is the stock market. 300 million people wake up one morning. It's probably more than that, but they wake up one morning and they decide, you know what, I just don't like being in the stock market anymore. And that affects you, and yet you don't have any control over it. So what we're going to do is create this financial model that you see on the right. It's going to be coordinated, integrated. It's going to be verifiable. That means we're going to be able to look at it and verify whether or not our strategies are effective. Our performance is going to be beyond your needs and beyond your goals. It's not going to be based on sales hype. It's going to have automated implementation, and it's going to be organized and controlled. We're going to be able to identify right away those things that you do control and those things that you don't. And we'll mitigate the risk on those things that you don't control. And on those things that you do control, we're going to maximize the efficiency. We're going to make sure every single dollar you put into your model is the most effective dollar that it can possibly be. We're going to get as much wealth out of that single dollar, get multiple uses out of it if possible, but we're going to get the most wealth out of that single dollar that we possibly can. One of the things I've always hated hearing in traditional financial planning is, let's set a wealth goal. Let's say, for example, you need, or we're going to tell you that you need $1 million when you retire. First of all, we know that that need doesn't exist yet. And so it's really unrealistic to say you need $1 million because we don't know. But the second thing they're going to do is they're going to set you up on a plan, and this kind of linear mathematical plan that says, okay, if you put $500 a month into this plan, you earn 12% annually. At the end of 35 years, you're going to have your $1 million. The only problem is, well, not the only problem, but the problem with that is that everything will go wrong. The day you implement that plan, you know that I'm probably not going to get 12% every year. What happens if 1 month I don't have $500 to put into my plan? Or what happens if I find out $1 million just isn't enough? So rather than set these ridiculous goals, we're going to say, I want to have as much wealth out of every single dollar that goes into my model as possible, period. It's as simple as that. Well, what our goal is, or what our objective is to do this with no additional out-of-pocket costs. Can we create more wealth? Can we manage your risk better, reduce risk, create greater protection benefits without any more money coming out of your pocket? And how we do that is by putting your money into motion. We use some of the tried and true principles that financial institutions use. Good example is how banks use fractional reserve banking. They can take a certain amount of money on deposit And they can turn that into 10 times as much money by lending it out, getting that money back on deposit, lending it out again, and doing that over and over again. And they put their money in motion. Most banks are they're only required to have a fraction of reserves of actual cash on hand to cover all the deposits they have in the bank at any given time. Great example is in the movie where George Bailey, they're making a run on the bank and everybody wants to pull their money out of the bank because they think there's something wrong, and he's sitting there saying, well, I don't have your money. It's in his mortgage, his house. That's where the money is, and banks do that. So can we teach you to put that same principle into your financial situation? This is my contact information. This is how you get a hold of me. I'd love to talk to you about how we can help you implement put together one of these financial models for your unique situation. And I thank you for your time today.